Tonight, end of exile. Julian Assange lands in Australia and reunites with family after plea deal ends 14-year legal saga. Australian leaders cautiously welcome him back to the motherland. New leadership. NATO appoints Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte as next leader amid ongoing Ukraine war and uncertainty over US commitment. Romanian President Klaus Iohannis withdraws from the race. Legal relief. New York judge partially lifts gag order on Donald Trump in hush money trial. Trump now free to criticize witnesses but must refrain from commenting on prosecutors. Miraculous rescue. A 4-year-old boy found alive after 22 hours in California forest. Father calls it a modern-day miracle. All that and more as World News Tonight starts right now.
This is Derana World News Tonight. Reporting from Colombo, here's Sanuvi Mudanayaka.
Good evening and thank you for joining us on World News Tonight. Some key updates and stories are lined up to report to you, and we start off with the latest updates on Julian Assange. Julian Assange has returned to his homeland of Australia after being freed from a US court in Saipan after accepting a plea deal, ending his extensive 14-year legal odyssey. Assange pleaded guilty to a single charge of conspiring to disclose classified US defense documents and was released with no further penalties, marking the conclusion of a decade-long battle.
WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange walked free on Wednesday from a court on the US territory of Saipan after pleading guilty to violating US espionage law. It ends a years-long battle to avoid prison in the United States. After his hearing, he left without answering questions to the media. He waved as he got into a white SUV, which took him to a private jet waiting to fly him to Australia. In the 3-hour hearing, Assange pleaded guilty to a count of conspiring to obtain and disclose classified national defense documents. His media group released the largest leak in US military history in 2010. Tens of thousands of classified military files detailing the US war in Afghanistan and Iraq, and thousands of diplomatic cables. Assange told the court, quote, "Working as a journalist, I encouraged my source to provide information that was said to be classified in order to publish that information, and that I believed the First Amendment protected that activity, but I accept that it was a violation of the espionage statute." Washington has said the release of the secret documents put lives in danger. On Wednesday, Chief US District Judge Ramona V. Manglona accepted his guilty plea and released him due to time already served in a British jail. One of Assange's lawyers, Barry Pollock, spoke after the hearing.
We firmly believe that Mr. Assange never should have been charged under the Espionage Act, and it is appropriate for the judge, as she did today, to determine that no additional incarceration of Mr. Assange would be fair, would be appropriate, and it is time for him to be reunited with his family.
Assange had spent over 5 years in one of Britain's toughest prisons, battling extradition to the US. And prior to that, 7 years in the Ecuadorian embassy in London, as he fought sex crimes accusations in Sweden. While in the Ecuadorian embassy, Assange had 2 sons with his partner Stella, who had been one of his lawyers. The Australian government has been calling for Julian Assange's release, with Prime Minister Anthony Albanese telling the Australian Parliament Wednesday his case had dragged on for too long.
Today, the NATO allies selected Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte as NATO's next boss, as the war in Ukraine rages on its doorstep and uncertainty hangs over the United States' future attitude to the transatlantic alliance. Rutte's appointment became a formality after his only rival for the post, Romanian President Klaus Iohannis, announced last week that he had quit the race, having failed to gain traction.
Outgoing Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte has been officially selected as NATO's next Secretary-General. Rutte will assume his position as head of the Defence Alliance from the 1st of October 2024, following the decade-long reign of former Norwegian Prime Minister Jens Stoltenberg. A long-time supporter of Rutte, Stoltenberg welcomed the appointment. Posting on X, he said, "I know I am leaving NATO in good hands." Mark Rutte became Prime Minister of the Netherlands for the first time in 2010, but resigned last July after his four-party coalition fell out over how to deal with migration. He faced a number of scandals while in office, but gained the nickname Teflon Mark for his ability to bounce back from adversity. Rutte has supported Ukraine and its right to defend itself since Russia invaded the country in February 2022. He previously said it was one of the reasons he went for the NATO job. Once in office, Rutte will serve a minimum term of 4 years.
Russia and Ukraine have taken a significant step toward humanitarian relief by each handing back 90 prisoners of war yesterday, marking a notable moment in the ongoing conflict between the two nations. Meanwhile, the first shipment of ammunition from a Czech initiative has arrived in Ukraine, while Kyiv has begun talks to join the European Union.
With the United Arab Emirates working as the intermediary, Russia and Ukraine on Tuesday took part in a prisoner exchange involving 90 prisoners of war each. The swap is one of several periodic prisoner swaps made during the more than 2 years of war, with the latest exchange taking place in May when each country handed over 75 prisoners of war. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky said the latest swap is on the path to bringing all detainees home. Meanwhile, the first shipment of ammunition from a Czech initiative arrived in Ukraine on Tuesday. This comes as the EU member has led an effort to buy ammunition with funding coming from NATO allies to help Ukraine in its war with Russia. Officials in Prague said in May that the first 50,000 to 100,000 artillery shells would arrive in Ukraine in June. The Czech government said that over $1.8 billion in payments or firm commitments from 15 donor countries had been made, which would allow for 500,000 artillery rounds for Ukraine by the end of the year. Of the countries that pledged to take part in the Czech-led initiative, only 5 had delivered the promised payments by the end of May. The European Union and Ukraine also began membership talks on Tuesday, a move Russia has long opposed. The EU accession talks began during an intergovernmental conference in Luxembourg, with President Zelensky on his social media page on X saying that his people are realizing their European dream, adding that Ukraine is returning to Europe. However, Tuesday's talks will most likely be just a small step on a long road, as Turkey has been in accession talks for almost 2 decades without a membership.
Over to the United Kingdom now. Britain's King Charles welcomed Japan's Emperor Naruhito and his wife to London at a Buckingham Palace banquet yesterday, celebrating economic, diplomatic and cultural ties on the first day of a 3-day state visit. King Charles stated that their governments are working together to provide a stable world for future generations, and they are looking forward in supporting all of these shared endeavours that endure ties between their people that transcend geographically. Well, to get more on this story, let's connect other Derana World News special correspondent Arunya Adhikari joining us from Nottingham in the United Kingdom.
Yes, Sanavi. The Emperor's trip, postponed from 2022 due to the COVID pandemic, seeks to deepen the military, cultural and scientific links between the two countries. Naruhito paid tribute to the late Queen Elizabeth, who was on the throne when the invitation was first issued, and he highlighted Charles' work on environmental projects and spoke of the strength of diplomatic ties. He said that the multi-layered collaboration and exchange between the two countries is accelerating in various areas, including politics and diplomacy, the economy, culture and the arts, science and technology, as well as education. The visit comes at a difficult time for the British monarchy after King Charles was diagnosed with cancer earlier this year, and as William's wife Catherine undergoes preventative chemotherapy treatment for cancer. In another setback, Princess Anne, Charles' younger sister, suffered a head injury on Sunday after an incident believed to have involved a horse. Emperor Naruhito came to London in 2022 to attend Queen Elizabeth's funeral and is fond of Britain, having studied here in the early 1980s. Back to you, Sanuvi.
Thank you, and that was other Derana World News special correspondent Arunya Adhikari joining us from Nottingham in the UK. Operations at South Korea's Incheon International Airport were temporarily halted for about 3 hours following the disruption caused by refuse-fired balloons launched by North Korea. The incident, which included a balloon landing on the tarmac near Terminal 2, led to the closure of the airport's 3 runways. North Korea has been launching balloons filled with trash into South Korea since late May, with hundreds of them landing across the country. Several balloons were observed within and around the borders of Incheon International Airport, and this was not the first instance of such disturbances at the airport, which is located approximately 40 kilometers from the North Korean border. North Korea claims these balloons launches are in retaliation against propaganda campaigns by North Korean defectors and activists in the south, who sent balloons loaded with food, medicine, money and leaflets criticizing the North Korean leadership. North Korea launched a ballistic missile towards the sea today, with South Korea's military detecting the launch and Japan confirming it will not reach its territory. An analysis is underway to gather more details on the launch, which was directed towards the East Sea, also known as the Sea of Japan. Today's launch comes hours after the regime sent more trash-carrying balloons to the south late yesterday.
North Korea on Wednesday morning launched a ballistic missile that appears to have failed. According to South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff, the regime fired a ballistic missile toward the East Sea at around 5:30 a.m. from the Pyongyang area. A military official explained that the North appears to have attempted to test launch a hypersonic missile. However, the military said the launch apparently failed, as the missile reportedly exploded mid-air after traveling some 250 kilometers. Seoul and Washington's intelligence authorities are conducting further analysis of the launch. This is the regime's first ballistic missile launch in almost a month. The launch comes after Pyongyang earlier this week slammed the arrival of the U.S. aircraft carrier USS Theodore Roosevelt in South Korea and warned of taking new deterrence measures. The missile provocation also comes hours after North Korea sent trash-carrying balloons for the second straight night on Tuesday. This marks the 6th balloon launch since May 28th. On Monday night, the regime sent around 350 waste balloons, of which 100 landed in South Korean territory, mostly in Seoul and North Gyeonggi-do province. Pyongyang is presumed to have launched around 2,000 balloons so far. The latest balloon delivery caused dozens of domestic and international flights at Incheon International Airport to be suspended for around 3 hours early Wednesday to prevent the risk of an accident.
Time for a short commercial break. More world news coming right after this. On the road to the White House tonight, President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump are set for a historic showdown in tomorrow's presidential debate, marking the first debate between a sitting president and a former president. This debate will feature no studio audience, with microphones muted except for the candidate speaking, and podium positions determined by a coin flip.
Face to face for the first time in 4 years, President Biden and former President Trump will soon square off on the debate stage in Atlanta.
The president's excited about having a discussion about the issues that really matter to people at home.
The Biden campaign says the president has been preparing for Thursday's debate at Camp David and plans to outline his vision for a second term while drawing sharp contrast to Mr. Trump's record. The Trump campaign releasing few details about Mr. Trump's debate plans, insisting he doesn't need to prepare.
Winning teams don't reveal their playbook, so I won't either.
Independent candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr. will not be on the debate stage after failing to meet the 15% threshold of support required to participate.
Joe Biden doesn't have a clue. Now we're going to watch. Is anybody going to watch the debate?
After suggesting last week that Biden would be a, quote, worthy debater, Mr. Trump has increasingly criticized the president, complained about the debate format after agreeing to it, and again suggested he won't be treated fairly. He's even suggested his opponent is taking drugs.
I say he'll come out all jacked up, right?
Biden has clapped back in the past.
Donald Trump lost 2 debates to me in 2020. And since then, he hadn't shown up for debate. Now he's acting like he wants to debate me again. Well, make my day, pal.
The economy, inflation, abortion, immigration, and foreign policy all expected to be hot topics. Both men's age and competency is also likely to be discussed. Biden is 81. Trump is 78.
A judge partially lifted a gag order on Donald Trump in his hush money case in New York, where he was found guilty for falsifying business records last month. Justice Juan Merchan wrote in a ruling yesterday that Trump is now allowed to make public comments about witnesses in the case and speak generally about jurors in his trial. However, Trump is still prohibited from discussing any prosecutor, court staffer or their family members until his sentencing on July 11th.
A New York judge partially lifted a gag order on Donald Trump on Tuesday, following his conviction on criminal charges stemming from hush money paid to a porn star before the 2016 election. The revised order now allows Trump to speak publicly about witnesses in the case and eases a prohibition on his commenting about the jury. However, it keeps in place restrictions on his statements about individual prosecutors and others involved in the case. A separate order barring Trump or lawyers from either side from identifying members of the anonymous jury remains in effect. Prosecutors said last week that Trump supporters had attempted to identify jurors and threatened violence against them. Trump's lawyers argued the gag order was stifling the Republican presidential candidate's campaign speech and said it might limit his ability to respond to attacks from Democratic President Joe Biden during their debate on Thursday. Trump's lawyer did not immediately respond to a request for comment. A spokesperson for Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg's office declined to comment.
French Prime Minister Gabriel Attal and the chief of the Man far-right party Jordan Bardella clashed in an ill-tempered debate yesterday, which exposed fierce tensions less than a week ahead of the most polarizing elections in a decade. Attal, Bardella and MP Manuel Bompard, representing the left-wing coalition, exchanged accusations in a bruising live TV encounter.
Days before the first round of voting in France's snap parliamentary elections, the three leading blocs went head-to-head in a televised debate, pitting Prime Minister Gabriel Attal against National Rally President Jordan Bardella and Manuel Bompard for the New Popular Front. Bardella, who wants to ban dual nationals from holding certain jobs in defence and security, outlined his plans for the right to citizenship for those born in France to foreign parents.
This right to citizenship, which might have made sense a century ago, no longer makes sense in a world of 8 billion people. Continents, notably Africa, are going to explode demographically, and we know that a large proportion of would-be immigrants will be tempted to come to Europe.
As the three debated the disappearance of public services, particularly in rural areas, Gabriel Attal defended his achievements as Prime Minister.
French people are struggling to find an appointment with a GP or specialist. They say to themselves, OK, a doctor, it takes 10 years to train. How do we do until then? We need to free up time for our doctors. I said that pharmacists could prescribe antibiotics, for example, in case of tonsillitis or cystitis. Now it's possible.
The three were at loggerheads on the issue of purchasing power. Manuel Bompard has called for an increase in the minimum wage to €1,600 net.
If you raise the minimum wage today, as we are proposing, you will trigger a positive cycle in the French economy. If you talk to shopkeepers and entrepreneurs, they tell you that people don't have money to spend. If you give people more money to spend, that's money that goes back into the economy.
Gabriel Attal was clear about not wanting to go back on the pension reform that raised the retirement age to 64 last year. Manuel Bompard ultimately wants to decrease the retirement age to 60. The National Rally, meanwhile, says its promise to reduce the retirement age to 60 would only apply to those who work for 40 years.
A short commercial break. More world news coming on the other side. Welcome back. A 4-year-old boy who went missing from Rancheria campground in Sierra National Forest in California was found safe after 22-hour search. According to a statement by the Fresno County Sheriff's Office, Christian Ramirez was discovered near Huntington Lake by members of the Tulare County Search and Rescue Team.
Little boy lost and found. This 4-year-old is alive after going missing for 22 hours in a dense forest. Young Christian Ramirez enjoys a sandwich after being found huddled under a tree near Huntington Lake in Central California. His father couldn't be happier.
We really believe that we saw a modern-day miracle.
Imagine how scared little Christian must have been out there alone in the dark. The forest is home to snakes, coyotes, and mountain lions. His father holds him tight after they're reunited.
That was the best day of my life, to get my little boy back and for him to be able to hug us back.
50 sheriff's deputies and volunteers searched through the night, finding little Christian just after 8 a.m., a quarter mile from the family campsite.
And with that, we mark the end of today's bulletins. We'll see you again tomorrow with more world news and happenings across the globe. We will be joining again with Sina Maya Dunna next on the Nightly Business Report. Thank you and good night.